Imagine this scene. A civilian boat, right? Not a warship. But it's packed with humanitarian aid, things like baby formula, medical supplies, and also some really high-profile activists sailing peacefully. International waters. Then, boom, surrounded by military forces, drones buzzing overhead, they spray some kind of irritant, jam the radios.
Yeah.
It sounds like, I don't know, a movie plot. But this actually happened just a few weeks back, and it's kicked off a huge global argument.
It was incredibly dramatic, and it immediately throws up all these really tough questions.
Yeah.
About international law, where humanitarian aid stops, and, well, something else begins. And national sovereignty, too.
Exactly. That's the core we need to unpack. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the interception of the Madleen vessel. It was part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla.
That's right.
Yeah.
Happened just this June, 2025.
Yeah.
And yeah, it sparked enormous debate, lots of legal back and forth.
So what we've done is gather a whole stack of sources for you. We've got reports from the activists who were there, detailed legal takes, international reactions, basically everything we could find.
And our mission here is to pull out the key pieces, the really important insights, give you a shortcut, essentially, to understanding what's a pretty pivotal moment for maritime law and humanitarian action.
We'll cover the background, how we got here, then walk through the interception itself, and crucially, what it all means for you for the global conversation.
Okay.
So to really get it, we need the why, right? What was the context? What led up to the Madleen even setting sail?
Well, the backdrop is absolutely critical here. Since March 2025, Israel has maintained a total naval blockade on Gaza.
Total blockade.
Yes, and this wasn't just, a minor restriction. It dramatically worsened an already terrible humanitarian situation. We were seeing alarming reports of rising starvation in Gaza. That's the environment these activists were sailing into.
Right. And trying to do something about that situation is the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, the FFC.
Exactly. A coalition of activists. Their stated goal was very clear. Put up the siege nonviolently and deliver aid directly.
Now, this wasn't their first rodeo, so to speak. They'd tried something like this before.
That's right. There was an earlier mission, the Conscience. Back on May 2nd, 2025, it was actually struck by drones near Malta.
Struck by drones. Wow.
Yeah, so that incident was, well, it was an early warning sign, wasn't it? Showed just how tense things were getting in international waters, how risky these missions were becoming. It definitely raised the stakes for the Madleen.
Okay, so that's the context. Blockade, rising desperation, a previous dangerous attempt.
Whoa. Let's focus now on the Madleen itself. What was this specific vessel? Who was on it?
Right. The Madleen was a UK-flagged yacht left from Catania in Sicily on June 1st, 2025.
Okay.
And its cargo was purely humanitarian, things like baby formula, rice, flour, medical kits. The aim, they stated very clearly, was nonviolent protest by delivering this aid.
But it wasn't just the cargo that got attention, was it? It was the people on board. Precisely. That's where this mission really gained a global spotlight. There were 12 people on board.
12, okay.
And among them, some very well-known figures, most notably Greta Thunberg.
The climate activist.
Yes. And also MEP Rima Hassan, a member of the European Parliament.
Right, a politician. That's significant.
Hugely significant. Having them on board just amplified the mission's visibility enormously. It basically guaranteed the world would be watching whatever happened next.
Yeah.
You could say it was a very calculated move by the FFC.
And the world certainly was watching. So the Madleen is out there, international waters, heading towards Gaza, June 9th. What happens? Take us to that moment, around 5 a.m. UTC, about 185 kilometers off the coast.
Well, the interception itself seems to have been quite methodical. Israeli naval forces.
Yeah.
They used drones first to surround the yacht.
Yeah, drones.
Then, reports say they sprayed some kind of irritant onto the decks, probably a crowd control tactic to deter resistance or incapacitate people.
An irritant on a civilian boat.
That's what the reports indicate. And at the same time, they jammed communications, cut them off completely, then ordered everyone to drop their phones. Only after all that did military personnel actually board the vessel.
That sounds incredibly assertive, especially considering it's international waters.
It does. Then that brings us to Greta Thunberg's later statement, which really captured the activist perspective. She said they were kidnapped in international waters.
Kidnapped. That's a powerful accusation.
It really underscores the whole conflict here. From their side, it was a humanitarian mission, illegally stopped. an abduction, essentially outside of any nation's territorial waters where jurisdiction is normally very limited over foreign ships.
Yeah, that's where the legal fight really kicks off.
Absolutely.
So the vessel is boarded. What happens to the activists then? Where did they take them?
Right after the boarding, they were taken to the Israeli port of Ashdod first,
Ashdod, okay.
and from there, transported onwards to Tel Aviv airport for processing and deportation.
And was everyone deported immediately?
Not quite. It happened in stages. 4 people, including Greta Thunberg, apparently waived their right to appeal deportation and were sent home pretty quickly.
Okay.
Then another 6 followed later.
Mm.
But interestingly, 2 French activists were actually detained for quite a bit longer than the others.
Any reason given for that?
Well-
Or any details on their conditions?
The reasons for the longer detention aren't fully clear from the sources we have, but there were reports about the conditions generally. Some activists mentioned facing solitary confinement and other punitive measures while detained.
Solitary confinement.
Yes, those reports definitely fueled concerns from human rights groups about how the activists were treated after the interception.
Which brings us squarely to the legal and ethical questions. Intercepting a civilian ship, UK flagged, in international waters. I mean, that sounds like a major issue under maritime law.
It is. It's highly contentious, and that's really the crux of the legal debate.
So what's Israel's argument for doing it?
Israel's position is basically that the naval blockade of Gaza, established during an ongoing armed conflict, remains legally in effect. And under the laws of naval blockade, they argue they have the right to intercept vessels attempting to breach it, even in international waters, if they believe the vessel is heading for the blockaded area.
Okay, so they're claiming a right based on the blockade itself.
Correct. But that view faces very strong challenges.
From who? What are the counter-arguments?
Well, from major players, Amnesty International, various UN experts. They challenged the legality of the blockade itself. They've called it collective punishment against the Gazan population, which is prohibited under international humanitarian law.
Collective punishment, that's a serious charge.
It is. It implies punishing the entire population for acts they haven't individually committed. And Amnesty went even further with the interception itself. They said it flouts international law and even compared it to piracy.
Piracy? Wow, okay. That's not a term you throw around lightly in maritime law.
Absolutely not. Piracy under international law is considered a universal crime, meaning any state can prosecute it. So using that word is, well, it's legally significant. It dramatically escalates the accusation beyond just saying it was unlawful. And on top of that, some legal experts argue that even if you accepted the blockade's legality, which many don't, Israel still has a fundamental duty under international law to allow and facilitate humanitarian aid for civilians. Intercepting aid could be seen as violating that duty, too.
So multiple layers to the legal challenge here.
Definitely. It's complex.
Given all that, how did the rest of the world react? What was the international fallout?
Oh, the reaction was pretty swift and quite widespread. The EU got involved, particularly because one of their MEPs, Rima Hassan, was on
What were
board.
its diplomatic channels activated?
Exactly. Spain launched a formal protest against the interception. Turkey was very vocal, calling it a breach of the freedom of navigation.
Freedom of navigation, another key principle of maritime law.
A very key principle. And then, of course, human rights organizations globally condemned the action pretty much across the board.
So a lot of diplomatic noise and condemnation. But strategically, looking beyond the immediate headlines, what did the Madleen mission actually achieve? Did it have a lasting impact?
That's a really interesting question. Strategically, you could argue the Madleen mission was incredibly effective, maybe even a masterclass in what some call narrative disruption.
Narrative disruption, how so?
Well, think about it. By putting incredibly visible figures like Thunberg and an MEP on this small boat carrying basic aid,
Yeah.
they forced the global media, which might otherwise focus on, say, political statements or military clashes, to focus squarely on the human impact of the Gaza blockade.
Right. It made it a human story, not just a policy dispute.
Exactly. It wasn't just raising awareness in a general sense. It shifted the conversation. Suddenly, the debate wasn't just about Israel's security justifications, but about baby formula not getting through, about starvation. It powerfully highlighted the blockade's real-world consequences in a way few other things could.
So it brought the human cost right into the spotlight.
Very effectively. It showed how non-state actors, using visibility and, frankly, courage, can challenge powerful state narratives. It's something for you, the listener, to think about how these seemingly small actions can have big ripple effects on global perception.
That's a great point. So looking forward then, does this incident change things for future attempts? Does it set a precedent?
Oh, almost certainly. It sets a very significant precedent, I'd say. Anyone planning similar flotillas or humanitarian missions into contested waters now knows the potential response.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have to prepare much more thoroughly, legally, anticipating these arguments about blockade law. And tactically, too, thinking about communication backups, potential interception methods. The risks are clearer now and probably higher.
And the big question, I suppose, is accountability. Will there be any consequences through international courts or governments? Is that still up in the air?
That is very much still up in the air. It's the key unresolved issue. Will formal bodies take action? We don't know yet.
But the conversation has changed regardless.
Undeniably.
Yeah.
Whether or not there's formal legal accountability down the line, this incident has absolutely shifted the global discourse. It's put naval blockades, humanitarian access, and the rights of civilian ships under a much brighter, much more critical spotlight.
So it leaves us with a really difficult question, doesn't it? Something for you, listening, to really chew on. When you have these complex situations, international law, desperate humanitarian need, and genuine security concerns all colliding, what responsibility do nations and even individuals actually have? Especially when delivering aid itself gets framed as a security threat.
Yeah.
And maybe how will actions like the Madleens continue to push and redefine where the boundaries of national sovereignty actually lie out there on the open sea?
It's a fundamental question for our times, really.
Definitely something to think about until our next deep dive.